let's keep going through the 100 days of the 2023 changes to the National Electrical Code. One more thing to talk about in Article 440, air conditioning and refrigeration equipment, and that's a change that they made in 440.14 regarding the location of the required disconnecting means. All right, let's take a look. So 440.14 location clearance requirements for disconnecting means have been added. 440.14, this has been in the code for a very long time, says that disconnecting means must be within sight, readily accessible from the equipment. It can be in or on the equipment, but not over the nameplate or access panels. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things here. Number one, you have to have a way to shut off the equipment. Makes sense, nothing new here. It has to be within sight of the equipment. That's pretty standard for most disconnecting means requirements, whether we're talking about motors in 430.102 or air conditioners in 450.14 or appliances in 420.32. For the most part, you got to have a way to shut things off. It has to be within sight. Now, this says it has to be readily accessible from the equipment, and I emphasize from the equipment because that part's really important. Here we've got an air conditioner that's up on top of the roof. Is a rooftop readily accessible? Well, some are, some are not. If you go back to Article 100, readily accessible means that it's capable of being reached quickly, doesn't require a person to climb over or under obstacles or remove obstacles, or resort to a portable ladder. So do you need a portable ladder to get on the roof? Well, I guess it depends. Is there a permanent ladder to get you onto the roof? In a lot of commercial buildings there is, but in plenty of them they're not. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if the disconnect is readily accessible from grade. It has to be readily accessible from the equipment. It doesn't matter if you need a ladder to get to the equipment, right? Once you're at the equipment, then the disconnect has to be readily accessible from the equipment. And that makes a lot of sense because if you're working on the equipment, well, then you have to get to the equipment, whether you need a ladder or a helicopter or anything else. So there's no reason to make the disconnect readily accessible if the equipment itself requires a ladder to get to it. So you have to have a disconnect, has to be readily accessible, has to be within sight of the equipment. You can't put it over the nameplate or to obscure the nameplate or over access panels. Pretty straightforward stuff as far as all of that is concerned. The big change here is it now says that the disconnecting means must comply with the working space requirements of 110.26a. All right, now this I have mixed feelings about this. Here in the photograph, that is definitely a violation of the 2023 code. No question about it. And if I was the inspector, I would say that was a violation of the 2020 code as well. Because 110.26, not 110.26a, 110.26, before you get to A, 110.26 says all equipment has to be basically capable of being worked on safely. I don't think I can work on that disconnect safely. In my opinion, I don't think that's possible. I have to be sitting on the equipment, right, even to open the equipment up. So I don't think that is compliant with 110.26. Now, 110.26 is always required. That's a general requirement. 110.26a says specifically if your equipment is likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized, then you have to comply with 110.26a1 through a6. And that's going to talk about the depth of the equipment, needing 3 feet or 3.5 or 4 feet, the width of the working space, which is 30 inches minimum, not less than the width of the equipment. 110.26a3 talks about the height of the working space. 4 and 5 are kind of obscure. They talk about limited access and adjacent high voltage equipment. And then in the 2023 code, 110.26a6 says that the working space has to be as level and flat as is practicable. Okay, so by adding this language here, we no longer have to ask the question, is that disconnect likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized? Now, for some people, the answer was an obvious yes. Of course it's likely to require examination, adjustment, servicing, or maintenance while energized. If I ever have to work on the equipment, I'm going to open the disconnect and I'm going to measure voltage. That is examination while energized. And if that is a likely occurrence, then 110.26a already applied. So you can easily make the argument that this change doesn't require anything that wasn't already required. Now, I would not agree with that statement. I think this can easily add a requirement that was not there before because it removes the authority having jurisdiction's ability to interpret the rule. Again, 110.26, everything has to be capable of being worked on safely. 110.26a says you might need 3 feet and 30 inches and 6.5 feet, but now this rule doesn't say you might need it. It says you do need it. You will have 3 feet by 30 inches by 6.5 feet in front of your air conditioner disconnect, period. No room for discussion. I like this rule and I don't like this rule. I think this is a violation and I think it should be a violation. That should not be permitted. But I think there might be some pieces of not so much air conditioning, but maybe there's refrigeration equipment out there where requiring 110.26a clearance might be a little bit overkill. I'd have to really chew on that. But at the end of the day, no question this makes the installation safer. No question about that. And, that is kind of the goal of the code. Make sure it's a safe installation. So there you have it, 440.14.